So just quickly before this video begins, I finished it, and when I finished it I realised how long this video has turned out to be. So if you make it all the way through it, thank you very much. If you don't make it all the way through it, thank you for looking anyway. But what I will do is I will put timestamps in the description to where I'm talking about each episode. So I'll put a timestamp for episode 1, a timestamp for episode 2, a timestamp for episode 3, and then a timestamp for my sort of overall conclusion thing at the end. So if there's one particular episode you want to hear about, or just my overall thoughts of the project in general, just click the timestamp that is suitable for you, because that's the kind of considerate person I am. Anyway, here's me now about to ramble on for a very long time. Have fun. Gay, hello. Here a review today of not an album, actually, something that I'm very excited about, as a lot of us Beatle fans have been for a while. The release of the new Peter Jackson docu-series, as they've called it, The Beatles Get Back, which is the long-awaited sort of replacement for the Let It Be film. So this has been released. It was originally announced, January 2019 it was originally announced, and it's been delayed a few times because of COVID. It was originally supposed to be a proper film coming out in a cinema, but it got scrapped and instead replaced by this docu-series, as they're calling it, which has been released in 3 parts on Disney something or another. What's it called? Whatever the Disney streaming thing is. Anyway, originally we were all a bit upset, I suppose, that it wasn't coming to the cinema, but now I'm quite glad it hasn't, because we're getting, well, they've advertised it as 6 hours worth of footage, but each episode is longer than 2 hours. It's closer to 8 hours, to be honest, which is not a complaint. Anyway, so what I'm gonna do here is, at the time I'm recording this, it's only the Thursday and only the first episode has come out, but by the time you're seeing this, hopefully all of the episodes will have come out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a thing each day, and then after I've watched each episode, and then edit it together at the end, so it's like one big review sort of thing of each episode, rather than wait to the end and talk about it as an overall thing, which I probably will do anyway after I've seen all 3. But I thought while it's fresh in my mind, I'd talk about each episode after I've watched it. So before we talk about the first episode, which I want to talk about first, funnily enough, just want to give a little mention to this book, which I did in my Let It Be or my Get Back review, whatever, or the Let It Be anniversary edition. The new Get Back book that has come out. If you have not got this book, get this book. It is, honestly, if you're a Beatles fan, this is your Bible for these sessions. It's transcripts of the sessions. A lot of this stuff in this book is in the film, or the docu-series, as I should call it. Yeah, seriously, if you haven't got this book, get this book and get it read. Although now you can watch it. You can watch it as you read it if you really want. Yeah, it's also got nice little pictures in from Linda and who's the other photographer? Ethan Russell. I think they're mainly photos by Ethan Russell rather than Linda, but anyway. So, like I said, I'll talk about each episode, so you may notice I'll probably have different clothes on throughout this video. But yeah, at the time of recording this, only the first episode's out, but by the time you see it, they'll all be out. So that's irrelevant to you. Anyway, let's get into the first episode. Right, so the first episode focuses on days 1 to 7 of the sessions, which is the Twickenham sessions. So, as it starts, this first episode, it sort of has a background to the Beatles from when John and Paul first met in 1956, then it goes all the way through it all, through George and Ringo joining the band, and then Love Me Do, and then their rise to fame, Beatlemania, and then quitting touring. Then we've got Sgt. Pepper, Brian Epstein dying, Magical Mystery Tour, Rishikesh, the White Album, and then, actually it doesn't really talk about the White Album, but what it does talk about is Hey Jude, and the video of Hey Jude, where they recorded that in Twickenham Studios with an audience, and it was the first time they played to an audience in 2 years, and Michael Lindsay Hogg directed that music video, and they decided during that their next album, what they would do is record themselves while they're making it. They'd be recorded by a film crew, so they'd rehearse it, and then it would become, and then they'd play it all live, and that concert would become the album. And they would also have a TV special, which would be the concert itself, and then a documentary, which would be the making of it and the rehearsals and stuff. Obviously that didn't really happen, and originally at the time we got the Let It Be film in 1970, but yeah, all this stuff set on most of this footage is left unreleased. And most of this Twickenham footage from the first day is stuff we haven't seen before. There is a couple of things that were in the original Let It Be film, which I'll talk about. But yeah, most of this stuff we've never seen before. We've maybe heard some of it, like we've heard on bootlegs and stuff, but like the audio, but we've never seen the footage in this high quality. So first thing I'll say, Peter Jackson has done a great job with his footage. He's remastered it, he's restored it, whatever. It's all in 4K now. It looks crystal clear quality. I watched it on 4K TV. Yeah, really good. Top-notch job there by Peter. And Giles Martin, I believe, has done the sound. So he's done all the music, the audio and stuff, which again is very good. There's also subtitles for some of it when they're speaking, in case people can't understand what's being said, which, as a northerner from England, I kind of think it's, well, hang on, can people not understand this? It's quite obvious what they're saying. But I suppose it's mainly with George, funnily enough, he seems to get subtitled a lot. George must have the most distinctive accent. Anyway, so these 7 days at Twickenham, these are, historically, the way it's always been told in the story, the darker days, the days where they're arguing a lot. And based on what's happened in recent years with the Beatles and you know, the way the estates of John and George and Paul and Ringo these days, not that they have estates yet, view the Let It Be film, it was kind of thought that they re-edit history here and make it like it was a happy-go-lucky, you know, everyone's getting along, everyone's best friends during these sessions. But they haven't. They have left in the arguments and stuff, which is good. And yeah, most of it happens, I believe. I think most arguments we always believed anyway happened in the Twickenham sessions, which are these ones. So yeah, it hasn't edited any of them out really, but it does also back up their point that these sessions weren't as dark as they were made out to be. And it also begs the question of why did Michael Lindsay Hogg not use a lot of this footage originally? Anyway, I have made some notes of these first 7 days, and I'll read you some of the things that stood out to me. So the first day, this was on the 2nd of January 1969. This was the first day of the sessions. It's the first, you know, where they're discussing things, and first time hearing a lot of these songs, like Don't Let Me Down and I've Got a Feeling. George actually asks at one point, is that one called I've Got a Feeling? And then John replies, no, it's Everybody's Got a Hard One. And then Paul responds, everyone's got a hard one except for me and my monkey. And as he says it, John and Paul look at each other and they just start giggling. It's a lovely scene. And yeah, it kind of just sets the tone of where we're going with this. You know, it's not going to be like a bitter argument. It's just them laughing away. And, you know, there's other things played. Child of Nature is the very first thing that's played. Yeah, it's decent, but you know, it's kind of this first day just talking and just sort of Happy New Year and stuff, and from the documentary perspective, it's introducing you to all the characters, Sir George Martin, Glyn Johns, Michael Lindsay Hogg, Mal Evans, etc. Dennis O'Dell appears quite a lot actually, head of Apple Films. So yeah, day one, there's not really much to dive into. It's mainly just them setting up, getting ready to get to work on this planned rehearsal thing for this supposed TV film concert thing, which I didn't say was at this point supposed to be on the 18th of January, so they only had a fortnight, I think, to write a lot of new songs, rehearse them, learn them, and then play them live to an audience to be recorded for their new album. Anyway, so day one, there's not a lot really to it. Day two, however, there's a bit more to it. In fact, I think this is the day where I wrote the most notes. So day two, it starts with Paul, George and Ringo around the piano. I think Ringo's playing the piano and George is initially reading the Beatles fan club book thing, and there's one sort of amusing part where it says what do you make of George's shirt and tie or something, and George says I don't like it, and then George says to Paul, I like your beard, which is, I don't know, it made me smile at, because Paul just sort of appeared with a beard suddenly, because in the White Album he didn't have a beard, and then suddenly he's appeared with a beard, and George is like, I like your beard, man. Anyway, And then eventually when John arrives, they then start rehearsing a load of old Lennon-McCartney songs. A lot of this stuff never seen the light of day. But one song that does stick out is One After 909. That would, of course, make the rooftop concert, and it would make the Let It Be album. But yeah. And then they rehearse Give Me Some Truth, which is interesting because I've always felt, personally, I haven't actually reviewed Imagine, but I've always felt this should have been credited Lennon-McCartney, because when they are rehearsing this here, Paul is helping. Paul is properly helping here and contributing the lyrics and everything. It's really nice to see them singing it together. Yeah. And then after that, they attempt All Things Must Pass for the first time. I don't know if it is the first attempt of it, but it's the first time on film, at least, that it's attempted. And yeah, this is also the first George song they attempt. And John also suggests changing the lyrics to A Mind Can Blow Those Clouds Away, because the original lyric George has is A Wind Can Blow Those Mind Away. A wind can blow those clouds away, sorry, whereas John suggests changing it to Mind, which does sound better. Yeah, and then it ends day 2 with Paul playing I'm So Tired, which is obviously a John song from the White Album, but Paul sings it. This has been on bootleg for years. We've all heard it before. If you want to hear it, you can hear it. But now, there mustn't be any footage of this because it's just sort of on top of other footage, if that makes sense, of them looking tired. So then it goes off, they go off for the weekend, and then day 3 is the next Monday, and the atmosphere to me feels different on this day. It looks like there's a tension. Ringo virtually doesn't say anything at all this day. John says very little, and it's very much Paul and George who's doing a lot of the talking this day. And this is when the infamous Paul and George argument occurred, when they were playing Two of Us, and George said words to the effect of, I'll play what you want within I'll do what you want within reason, whatever it is that pleases you, I'll do. Which was in the original Let It Be film. But the original version on Let It Be that Michael Lindsay Hogg did edited this down. But here it's the full thing. And yeah, it's great to see the full thing with full context. You know, it's not as bad as it looked in the Let It Be film, really. Not that it ever looked bad, but, you know, it kind of suggests that Michael Lindsay Hogg maybe used it to make it look a bit more dramatic than it actually was. But yeah, and most of this day, they only really rehearsed Don't Let Me Down and Two of Us. Yeah, there's not a lot really seemed to happen on day 3, just there was a bit of a tension, a bit of an atmosphere, particularly between Paul and George. Anyway, day 4, this is an interesting day because it starts with Paul, George and Ringo being in Twickenham, and Paul is just sort of jamming on his bass, and it looks like there on the spot he's writing Get Back. He's sort of coming up with it, and he's humming the tune, he's sort of figuring it out. And George and Ringo are watching him, and then they join in. So George sort of starts playing along on his guitar, Ringo eventually gets on his drums. And yeah, it's interesting to see Paul effectively writing Get Back there on the spot. And then, you know, that day they also start discussing where the show could be. And it's this point when the first possible idea of the roof is mentioned, when Paul says doing a show somewhere where they shouldn't, but he initially suggested the Houses of Parliament in the viewing gallery. So yeah. Then day 5, George debuts I'm Your Mine. On the morning of day 5, he says that he wrote it the night before. He'd been watching something on BBC 2, which it does actually show you what it was he was watching. It mentions it in the book as well. Yeah, and they also play the fast version of Two of Us. It's the version that's in Let It Be, where John and Paul are messing about during the You and I Have Memories part, which is good. That's one of the highlights of the Let It Be film. It's good to see it in here. And actually, I think that Two of Us thing and the George and Paul argument from day 3, they're the only 2 bits from the original Let It Be film that is in episode 1 here of Get Back. So yeah, the fast Two of Us is played, and discussions continue on the show where they discuss going to Africa on a boat and playing, oh god, where was it? Somewhere in Libya on the coast, which they all seem up for it except for George at this point. And then they say we'll sleep on it and see how we feel the next day. And then we go to day 6, which starts with Paul being there on his own, and he's on the piano where he plays Another Day, which obviously eventually released as his debut single. Yeah, So he does that, and then after he's played Another Day, he plays The Long and Winding Road. This is also the first day where Linda is at the sessions. I think it's the only day where she's at the Twickenham sessions, which means any photos that we see of Linda's, which were taken at the Twickenham sessions, must have been taken on day 6. Also, what's interesting is they play Get Back, but it's still got the original lyrics where about the Pakistanis taking jobs. Now, for this Get Back film, they make an interesting thing that this is an anti-racism stand. I think this is just a recent thing. I don't think at the time they'll be thinking, we'll do an anti-racism stand. I think they're just taking the piss, to be honest. It's maybe just my opinion. While we're on the subject of making a stand against things, at the start of this, I should have said this at the start, the Get Back film, there is, it gives you a warning saying strong language and stuff, but it also says scenes of smoking. Do people find smoking offensive these days? I mean, I don't smoke and I wouldn't want to smoke, but I don't find it offensive. I'm not going to watch something and go, I'm not watching this, they're smoking, I cannot watch this. Yeah, is this where the world is now, where we have to warn people that there's smoking in the film? But anyway, yeah, it still has its original lyrics, which they're claiming now is an anti-racism stand. Personally, I always thought it was just them taking the piss. But anyway, that's me. They also play the song Commonwealth, which has been on bootleg for a long time. But here we get to see the footage of them actually doing it. And it's very good. I've always quite liked Commonwealth. It's Enoch Powell made a speech in the year before, in April '68, which was deemed as racist. But then some people thought he was only speaking the truth. You know, he was against the Commonwealth and stuff. And then Ted Heath kicked him out the shadow cabinet and whatnot, and Harold Wilson had to go, no, the Commonwealth's great, and blah, blah, blah. And Paul, and I think it's Paul, maybe John helps, but they just sort of improvised this song on the spot. Yeah, I've always liked Commonwealth, and it's just a messing about, it's nothing serious, but I've always wished it got a proper release. Yeah, so it's good to have it here. And then there's a version of She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, which I really like, because in the last verse, John answers back. So when Paul says, and got myself a steady job, and then John replies, it's about bloody time, which, yeah, was quite amusing. And then finally we have day 7. This is the big day. This is the day when George quits the band after a morning of playing Get Back, and 2 of us, he just gets up and says, I'm leaving. And then the camera's cut off, and it then says, which we've always known, he said, I'll see you around the clubs. Anyway, after something's gone on at lunchtime and George has disappeared, John, Paul and Ringo decide to carry on. They attempt a semi-serious version of I've Got a Feeling before they then just sort of mess around the rest of the day. They take the mick out of doing Don't Let Me Down, and then Yoko sings. I should have said, actually, Yoko appears throughout this whole thing. She's always there, but this is the first time you actually hear anything from her. She's just sat there quietly so far. You know, this first episode's about 2 hours 50 minutes, and for the first 2 hours 40 minutes Yoko is silent until now when she starts singing. But again, she's just, you know, it's just a joke around, and they're all messing around, dancing about, Paul swinging on the scaffolding and stuff. So yeah, they're just messing about, and they're discussing what they're going to do if George doesn't come back, and there's the possibility of Eric Clapton replacing him, which is mentioned by John. And then it ends with the demo version of Isn't It a Pity being played, which I've always liked that demo. It is available. It's on the, what's that, George? Oh, I forgot his name. That George solo Greatest Hits album. It's on there as a bonus track, this demo. It's very good. It was also in the Living in a Material World documentary. But it ends with that and saying that they had a meeting 2 days later at Ringo's house, and it did not go well, and that's how part 1 ends of this documentary. And it leaves us in suspense of, oh, is that the end of the Beatles? Well, spoiler alert, although by the time you're seeing this, all 3 episodes are out, spoiler alert, it isn't, because they get back together in Savile Row. So that is it, that is part 1. I'm about to transition into part 2, but for me, I now have to wait 24 hours to see the next episode. But episode 1, great, it's great, I love it, it's great to finally have it. As a Beatles fan, it's the stuff of dreams, really. So yeah, here's part 2. Let's see what I make of episode 2. Right, so I've just watched episode 2. It's Friday, November 26th. It's just come out. not so long ago, so I watched it all the way through. This one was 2 hours and 53, so effectively 3 hours. I believe this is the longest of the episodes, and yeah, I didn't think episode 1 could be topped, but it has. Episode 2, even better. So once again, I've made notes of, I've got 2 pages of notes this time for episode 2, of the day, of each day, the things that have stood out to me, that I found interesting. This is days 8 to 16, is it? Yeah, days 8 to 16, which is January 11th, maybe, no, not January 11th, January, well, I don't know, January 13th, I think, till whatever. I should know these dates. It only tells you in the documentary. But anyway, so we'll just pick up where we left off. So day 8, this one is the day after the meeting they had at George's, which didn't go well. They're still at Twickenham, and it starts off, you know, Paul and Ringo discussing the George situation, and at some point some flowers arrive where the guy says delivery for Mr. Harrison, where they all start laughing, which, yeah, I find that quite amusing, as did they, because obviously George has buggered off. But yeah, delivery for Mr. Harrison. Flowers, I think it was flowers for the Hare Krishna people who were there, who were in the background. I didn't say that in episode 1, but there are some Hare Krishna people that George has brought along. Anyway, John is sort of gone AWOL. No one knows where he is. No one can get hold of him. Apparently his line's engaged whenever they try to ring. Mal Evans eventually gets a hold of him, and then Paul goes along and gets him to come in. Linda is also there this day. I said in the last bit of the episode 1 that Linda appeared to only appear on day 6 at the Twickenham sessions. Turns out it's not true. It's day 8 as well, so she's there for 2 of the days at Twickenham, but I don't think she takes any pictures this day. She maybe does, but we don't see any in the film, and from what they're wearing, it doesn't look like anything would have been taken that day. Anyway, then at lunchtime, John comes in, and him and Paul go for a private meeting with just the 2 of them in the cafeteria at Twickenham, but the directors and whatever, the sound people, have hidden a microphone. It's very sneaky, this, and there's probably laws against it as well. It's probably illegal in this day and age, but they've hid a microphone in the flowers on the table so that they can pick up the conversation. And John and Paul are just sort of having a discussion, and it actually gets quite tense at one point. You can, obviously there's no footage, it's just the audio, but it sounds quite tense between the pair of them. And it's probably the most tense moment of episode 2, this. But anyway, nevertheless, after this lunchtime meeting, Paul, John and Ringo return to the main bit in Twickenham to do more rehearsals, where they rehearse Get Back. During this rehearsal of Get Back, however, John looks very bored and not particularly interested. But they do carry on writing the words, and I believe this is when the Tucson, Arizona bit comes in. This day, John helps suggest that, but other than that, it's only really Paul who looks like he's enjoying himself here. John looks like he's got better things to do. Anyway, that's day 8. Day 9, once again, we are at Twickenham still. It's just the Threetles. It's just John, Paul and Ringo, but to start off with, it's just Paul and Ringo who are there. And it begins with a piano scene, which I believe, once again, I think this is the only scene in episode 2 that was in the original Let It Be film. One of my favourite scenes from the original Let It Be film, when Paul's at the piano and then Ringo walks in, and I think it's Ringo goes, "Morning, Paul," and then Paul goes, "Morning, Rich," and then the pair of them play a little thing together on the piano. That is one of the highlights of the original Let It Be film. Thankfully, it's here in Get Back as well, although I'm not sure if this is an extended version. It seems to go on longer than I remember it in the original Let It Be. So yeah, this in day 9, it's very good. Yeah, it's a good way to kick off day 9. Paul is also on the piano, and he debuts Backseat of My Car, which is of course a closing track on Ram. Doesn't really, I think he's only written it the night before, but the lyrics are far from being finished, but it's got the basic tune. Anyway, and then this is also the day you've maybe seen footage of John being interviewed for something or other, where it's believed he's taken heroin or something, or some sort of drug beforehand, because he seems sort of out of it. Anyway, he's away doing that, and then eventually him, John and Ringo are all sat around, and I think Peter Sellers is there as well. and John's just sort of messing around, and I can't remember exactly what he's talking about, but they're all laughing and stuff. It's something about Boy Scouts not being able to wank or something when they've got shorts on. Anyway, the others are all laughing, finding it very funny. But I believe they've been discussing the George situation again. I think I forgot to say on day 8, it was when they decided they'd go and see George again, which was all going to be on the Wednesday. So anyway, that happens, and then yeah, that's it for day 9. Just sort of they then leave. And then day 10, well, the next day after that, I think is when they're going to have a meeting with George, and that's when they agree that they'll abandon the idea of a TV special and they will go off and do a film instead, like make it a documentary film. So as part of this meeting, it is also decided that they will abandon the sessions at Twickenham and move to their own studios that Magic Alex has been building in the basement of their Apple offices in Savile Row. So the next day, day 10, it's still at Twickenham, but Paul is the only Beatle at Twickenham this day, where he records a demo of Oh Darling. And while he's doing this, Mal Evans is packing up all the equipment to move it to the Apple studios. It's also on this day when George is briefly seen, because he comes to Twickenham to meet Glyn and go with Glyn to check the Apple studios in Savile Row. And they're not happy with Magic Alex's equipment. They realise, basically, he's taking the piss, really, and his equipment is just, it's useless. It's, you know, full of distorted feedback, tape hiss, etc. So they have to ask George Martin to get equipment from Abbey Road Studios. Anyway, the next day that we have is day 11. This is when the sessions move to Apple. But interestingly, cameras aren't allowed in this day. So for whatever reason, there's no cameras, there's no mics, there's nothing. All we see is them walking in this day, and the film crew are outside talking to some Apple scruffs. So yeah, day 11, not a lot going on that we can see. But day 12, the cameras are now allowed in Apple Studios, and George is now properly back in the band. They are a 4-piece again. And what is clear is the atmosphere is completely different. It is much, much better. Yeah, they're obviously much more relieved to be somewhere else. And the film also, you know, the Get Back film, it had become a bit darker. It had kind of lost its way a bit in the later days of the Twickenham sessions, because it got on a bit like they're just messing about. Nothing's really happening here. But the vibe suddenly changes. It goes back to how it was kind of at the start of the Get Back film, at the start of the Twickenham sessions, where it's a lot more positive again. So yeah, George is now properly back. The atmosphere is much better, and it kind of starts with John reading a newspaper article. We've seen this before, where he's said about Beatle George Harrison about beating up a photographer outside a nightclub or something. And there's also a very funny scene where Paul is reading a newspaper article about the Beatles and how they've gone all weird and things. Where he's reading that in like a funny voice while John's singing something on top, which, yeah, that's quite amusing. Dig a Pony also seems to be debuted this day. I don't think they rehearsed it up till this point at Twickenham, but it's now here, ready to go. They also do more covers and jams. For some of them, Paul is on drums and Ringo is on Paul's bass, which is interesting. And they also discuss needing a 5th person to play on the piano or the keyboard, because if they're doing this live, obviously they can't have piano and bass and 2 guitars when there's just 4 of them. And Nicky Hopkins' name is mentioned this day as a possible person to get in to play the piano. Anyway, then we got to day 13, where there is talk of a concert being held again. Now the idea is on top of Primrose Hill, which is a park in London. There's discussions of having it there. And it's quite clear this is only the 2nd day where cameras are in the Apple sessions, and the songs are a much more beginning to sound more like their finished versions. They're sounding more flushed out, more proper, if that makes sense. So also on this day, Billy Preston comes in just to say hello, but yeah, he gets himself in a very nice situation, because he comes in to say hello and they end up asking him to come and play the keyboards, which he happily agrees to do. So now Billy Preston is in the scene. He's, you know, joining in with the band, playing along. And they're now a 5-piece. John, I think it's John, or is it George maybe, who suggests that the Beatles would be better as a 5-piece. I think it's on this day, it's maybe a later day, I haven't wrote it down, but they talk about how Billy has made it a much more pleasant experience, and how having a 5th member is definitely a good thing. And George suggests having Bob Dylan in the band as a sixth member, and then Paul suggests, no, four's enough. I think that's maybe a later day than this one, but it is in episode 2 somewhere. So the first thing they attempt with Billy on the keys is I've Got a Feeling, and then after that they attempt Don't Let Me Down, and this version of Don't Let Me Down is the version that is on Glyn Johns' Get Back album. And also on day 13 we have the very first mention of Alan Klein. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Peter Brown. It was Peter Brown. Mentions him to John on the QT. So yeah, that's day 13. Day 14 begins with a full band attempt of Oh Darling. I think this is the first time we've seen them all attempt it. The only other time in the film we've seen it is earlier on at Twickenham when Paul was demoing it on his own. So that's good to see. And work on Get Back continues. This is when a piano solo is suggested for Billy to play, as well as some guitar solos. And what's interesting here is George Harrison is very involved in like helping with the structure of the song, so how it goes, like verse, chorus, guitar solo, verse, chorus, etc. You know, George is very involved in helping Paul with this, which is interesting to see. Also on day 14 we have the when they're playing I've Got a Feeling, and then they start messing around with Help and Please Please Me. That footage has existed for a long time in black and white, but now we have it in like proper 4K colour, like the proper footage of it. So that's good to have. And it's also on this day where George Harrison suggests that Get Back be released as a single, because he thinks it's pretty much good enough. It'd be good they could cut it there and then and have it out in a week's time. So yeah, the others seem very keen on the idea of Get Back being a single. Anyway, then we have day 15. Billy Preston is away for this day. He's away working on the TV show with Lulu, I think. Paul is also, it's been asked a few times and mentioned a few times that why is Paul playing his Hofner? George Harrison's asked him a few times, where's your Rickenbacker? Well, today the Rickenbacker does appear. But I don't know why Paul's, not playing it. He says at one point the Hofner's lighter. And when he's on his Rickenbacker, he seems to be complaining about the strings or something or another. So yeah, he has got his Rickenbacker this day. But then when they go to rehearse Two of Us, there isn't any bass. Paul switches to the acoustic guitar. And he even suggests not having bass on the track Two of Us when they rehearse it. And also Teddy Boy gets debuted this day, which obviously did make Glyn Johns' Get Back album, but it didn't make the release Let It Be. It ended up on Paul's debut solo album McCartney. But I believe even Phil Spector on his Let It Be was going to have Teddy Boy on it, but the only reason it got taken off, which was at the very last minute, was because Paul put it on McCartney instead. And what's interesting is there's always been the story that obviously in this Beatles version John starts singing Take Your Partner and Do-Si-Do. The way the story's gone is the reason he's done that is because he was that bored of playing it, and he did it just to try and wake himself up, I suppose. But interestingly, seeing the footage of it suggests otherwise, because it looks like John is just laughing around, and so is Paul. It looks like they're just messing about. So yeah, that's quite nice to see. Anyway, day 16, this begins with footage from India, which I believe is footage that Paul has shot on his camera, and there's also footage that John has shot from the helicopter with the Maharishi. It's interesting because, I may be wrong here, but I don't think this footage has ever been made available to the public before. I've never seen it, at least. Maybe you all have seen it and I've just missed it, but personally I've never seen this footage. It's obviously from their personal archives. And yeah, it's really interesting to see. And there's also footage of the two monkeys going at it, because if you've ever heard an interview with Paul discussing the song Why Don't We Do It in the Road, he discusses about how it was because two monkeys started going at it with each other in the middle of the road, and it turns out that Paul filmed it. There's footage. Paul is filming monkey porn with his own camera. So there we go. There's something that's in this film that we didn't think we'd see. Anyway, once again on day 16, Billy is away again. And they're attempting Two of Us again, but this time they're sort of doing it in funny voices. I think this is the version that Paul spoke about a few times recently, where they're just sort of doing it as I can't say the word, ventriloquism, like that, without opening their mouths. And they also sing like funny Scottish accents and stuff. Yeah, really good. And also on day 16, the version of For You Blue that ended up on the Phil Spector Let It Be album was recorded this day. Anyway, it's also decided this day that the Primrose Hill gig, it's not possible, and it's not going to be possible to do a gig anywhere in London which at such short notice. So there's kind of a bit of a doomer on it, and Paul's going on about how he wants an epic climax to the film. It'd be boring just to finish it in the studio the way it started. So Michael Lindsay Hogg and Glyn Johns suggests to Paul going up on the roof, and then we have some very interesting footage of Paul and Ringo up on the roof checking it out, just looking at the view and stuff and seeing if it will hold the weight of all their equipment. And we have seen footage of this, like photos of Paul and Ringo on the roof a few days beforehand checking it, but we've never seen the actual video footage of it, which, yeah, that's nice to see. So after that, they decide to go with the rooftop idea, and they're now set on the rooftop gig. They've committed to it. And that is where episode 2 ends. So the next episode, which is coming out tomorrow, which I'm about to transition into me talking about, I'm assuming that will be the last days of the Apple sessions and the full rooftop gig. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll see you for that. Right then, Saturday, 27th November, episode 3 has now come out. I've now seen that episode. I've seen all of Get Back. So I'll talk about day 3 now. So this is days 17 to 22. Once again, the sessions continuing at Apple. And then the climax, the rooftop gig. Anyway, day 17. So this begins with a scene that was in the original Let It Be film, which is Ringo playing Octopus's Garden on the piano and George helping him out. And then John eventually comes in while they're working on it. But yeah, this is a lovely scene. One of the highlights of the original Let It Be film. It's nice that it's still here, that we still have this scene of Ringo playing Octopus's Garden on the piano. At this point, he's only got the chorus, but yeah, it's nice to see everybody rallying together to help Ringo with this. Anyway, while they're doing that, Paul and Linda arrive, and this is the day when they bring Heather along. So this is quite a nice day, actually, because you see them, all 4 of them, well, not just the Beatles, but everybody there messing around with Heather and just having a nice time and, you know, trying to entertain a child. And you kind of see what all 4 of them are like as dads, and what they'd be like as fathers, I suppose. And yeah, it's nice to see. Yeah, it's a really nice scene, the ones with Heather. And there's a really good scene, I think it was in the original Let It Be film as well, where Heather bangs on the Ringo's drum and Ringo like jumps, which, yeah, I really like that. Also, they record Dig It this day, the version that ends up on Let It Be, and I believe the version on the Get Back album, because I think it's the same thing, they're both recorded this day. So yeah, and they also play some rock and roll tunes, and some of these tunes I think form the rock and roll medley that's on Anthology 3, which is good. And the version of The Long and Winding Road, which Phil Spector ruined on Let It Be, is also recorded this day, which, you know, it's interesting because I think on later days after this they record better versions of The Long and Winding Road. Why they went with this one, I don't know. Although it was Phil Spector that went with it. But anyway, that's about it for day 17. It's quite focused on Heather being there this day, which is nice. Anyway, day 18, this begins with, I think this is more of the rock and roll covers that form the medley on Anthology 3 being recorded this morning, which is cool to see. And then George Harrison is on the piano where he debuts Old Brown Shoe, and Paul and Ringo are there, and Paul jumps on the drums to help out. And then I think eventually Ringo gets on the drums, and then Billy Preston goes on the bass, and Paul's playing George's guitar, which is interesting because Paul's obviously playing it upside down. But yeah, it's nice to see them work on Old Brown Shoe, because I've always liked Old Brown Shoe. I think it's a really fun song, which, yeah, definitely a highlight. And the version of Oh Darling is on Anthology 3 and also on the recently released deluxe version of Let It Be, where John starts singing that Yoko's divorce has come through and all that. That's recorded on this day, so that's good to see. And there's also a scene when the Beatles go out and all the crew who are working there jump on the instruments. I don't know who they all are, but because I can't remember their names, but we've got someone on bass, we've got someone on guitar, someone on the piano, someone on the drums. Yeah, it's quite cool to see. They just have a little jam and mess around. Also, Paul plays Strawberry Fields very briefly on the piano, which is quite nice. And John's playing the guitar along with him, so that's quite cool. And then they spend quite a lot of time working on Get Back this day, and it's also on this day where the finished version of it that gets released as the single and on the Let It Be album, and on Get Back and on Let It Be Naked, and virtually every version of Get Back that's ever been released. That version was recorded this day. So yeah, that's good. That's day 18. Then day 19, George debuts something on this day, or it's the first time we've seen him playing at these sessions anyway. And this is when he's asking the band to help out, Paul and John. John says something like, tracks me like no other cauliflower, just sing that until you get the words right. And George sings, tracks me like no pomegranate or something. So yeah, that's cool to see. We also see the band attempt Love Me Do, which the audio of this has been around as a bootleg for years. But it's good to see the video footage of it. Yeah, I like that. And interestingly, on this day, Paul, it's mentioned in the Get Back book as well. Great book if you haven't read it. Paul has to go somewhere in the afternoon, so he leaves about 1:30 for a few hours. So it's just John, George and Ringo left along with Billy Preston. So they start off by playing I've Got a Feeling. But obviously Paul's not there, so John sings it instead. So that's quite interesting hearing John sing it. There is a bootleg out there, of this performance with John singing the whole thing. In this, we don't see the full thing of John singing it, but we hear a bit of it. And then John starts discussing Alan Klein with George. And, you know, John's sort of saying that he's great, he's fantastic, he knows everything about them. And, yeah, and he starts talking about, I can't remember exactly what it is, I have read it before, but about something to do with feeding children in Africa and stuff. Anyway, after Paul gets back, they then focus on Don't Let Me Down, where the version that gets released as the B-side to Get Back is recorded this day. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And John also plays I Want You She's So Heavy this day. I think this is perhaps the first time it's been played. It's maybe its debut. I don't know. It's the first time we've seen it in the film anyway. And then later on, Alan Klein arrives upstairs, and John says Alan Klein's here, and they all leave. And as he says Alan Klein's here, the camera actually focuses on Paul, and Paul doesn't look a happy man. So yeah. But that's day 19. That's where day 19 ends, with Paul sort of foreseeing the future. Anyway, day 20, this begins with John discussing Alan Klein with Glyn Johns, discussing what had gone on the night before when they met him. And Glyn Johns has obviously been quite involved with the Rolling Stones before this, and obviously Klein is involved with the Stones. And the impression you get off Glyn is basically he's not a fan of Mr. Klein. Maybe Glyn Johns, like Paul, had the foresight to see what he's really like. But anyway, after that we also have another scene from Let It Be, which the original Let It Be film, where Paul is talking to John about how they used to play in Hamburg and all the live scene and getting back to proper gigs. And it's the scene where in Let It Be, it's one of those more controversial scenes because it looks like Paul's rambling on and John's bored out of his mind, just thinking, please shut up. And yeah, it's still kind of like that. We get more of the full thing here. I think, once again, the Let It Be version was edited. But yeah, we get more of that. And interestingly, Paul seems against the idea of the roof. This is just the day before they're supposed to do it. And Paul doesn't seem in favour. He still wants to play to like a proper audience, like not a surprise gig, unannounced, like a proper gig where it's organised, as people come in, a proper Beatles crowd. That's what Paul seems to still be in favour of. But yeah, so he's sort of arguing that he doesn't say he doesn't want to go on the roof, but he's not really sounding overly enthusiastic about it. George Harrison, however, does openly admit he doesn't want to go on the roof. He'll do it if he has to, but he doesn't want to. And Ringo and John actually are very enthusiastic to get on the roof. So yeah. And George also mentions on this day that he's got a lot of songs that are just lingering around, which is enough to cover 10 years worth of Beatles albums, with the 2 songs per album thing he gets. So he mentions to John the idea of him doing a solo album, and he thinks it'd be good for him to do in fact all 4 of them to do solo albums, and obviously still do the Beatles thing on the side. But yeah, that's interesting. And when I talked about episode 2, I mentioned I did a version of 2 of Us on one of the days where I did Silly Voices, and I mentioned I did the ventriloquism version that day, one of those days. I was wrong. It turns out they didn't, because it's here on day 20, the version where John and Paul are going to us right now. Anyway, day 20 then ends, and then the following day, that's all for day 21. We have the rooftop gig, the finale, the grand climax of the film. So, it starts off with Michael Lindsay Hogg setting up all the cameras on the roof. Mal Evans, I assume, and others have already set up all the instruments and stuff. And George Martin and Glyn Johns are down in the basement ready to record what's going up on the roof. And then the Beatles come on up, and yeah, it's interesting because it's showing you where all the cameras are positioned and all the different, on the roofs, on the other roofs and stuff. And there's quite an interesting, there's an amusing scene where Paul spies the film crew on the other roof and he gives them a wave and they all start waving back at him, like messing about. I'm amused by very simple things. Anyway, they eventually start playing, and this is the first time we've ever seen the full gig. I don't think this audio has been on bootleg or anything, so for all of us, this is the first time we have ever heard the full rooftop gig. And it starts very interestingly, actually, because it starts straight into the solo, I Get Back. That guitar solo. So yeah, it starts off with John playing that solo, and that's where they go from. And what's interesting is, unlike the original 8B film, it goes, as they say, it goes straight down to the street level where there's cameramen, and it shows you like the crowd stopping and looking around trying to work out what's going on at the moment they start, which, yeah, that's really good to see. Anyway, they then stop playing this sort of jam version of Get Back, and then they do a proper full-on version of it. I think this is the version that opens on the Let It Be film. So yeah, we have that, and then when they finish that, they then play another version of Get Back. So that's 3 or 2.5, depending on how you look at it, versions of Get Back done. And then after that, we get Don't Let Me Down. This is the version of Don't Let Me Down we've always heard, with the vocals from John where he messes it up on the 3rd verse. And it's also during this when the police arrive at Apple. There is a camera crew set up downstairs who were filming this conversation, I suppose, or this exchange, that's the word, this exchange that the Apple reception staff have with the police, where the police are saying we've had 30 complaints of noise in the last half hour and whatnot. And what's quite nice as well is we also still have the interviews with the public on the street. But interestingly, unlike the interviews in the original Let It Be film, they are included on here. But there is a lot more. There's obviously a lot of interviews being recorded that day, just asking people on the street, what do you think of this? And a lot of them got left off the original film, but there's a lot more on here, and it's really interesting to see. And even the versions that were on the original Let It Be film, like where that bloke says it's very inconsiderate or whatever to disrupt all the businesses around here. Even that, it turns out his thing was edited because he says a lot more. There's more to what he says in this. Anyway, after they finish Don't Let Me Down, they play I've Got a Feeling. Again, this is the version from the original 8B film. We've seen this before. And the police downstairs are now threatening to arrest people if it doesn't stop. But most of the public seem to be enjoying it. I would say for every 3 people they ask, maybe that's a bad example, I would say 90% of the people that they ask are saying that they enjoy it and they're all in favour. They seem to be struggling to find people who are against it. And all the ones that are against it tend to be older men in suits and stuff, who are very well spoken, you know how it is, you know. Anyway, after they finish I've Got a Feeling, there's a very nice scene where the Beatles all walk to the edge and look over to see the crowd all on the street, which again, that wasn't in the original Let It Be film, but yeah, I really like that. And then after that, they play One After 909. This is the version of One After 909 that ended up on the Let It Be album. It's also on the Get Back album. Probably the version on Let It Be Naked as well. Yeah, it's just the one performance. It does the job. It's a good performance. And then after that, they play Dig a Pony. And once again, this is the version of Dig a Pony, which goes on to Let It Be. Anyway, I think it's at this point when John starts to say that he can hardly feel his hands because of the cold. And I personally think after this, it doesn't go bad or anything, but they kind of drop off the quality of the performances. They kind of become a bit more sloppy and loose, like they're, well, probably because of the cold, they're struggling a bit more, particularly John. I get the impression anyway. But they play I've Got a Feeling again after this. This is the second performance of it, and well, I've never seen it performing like this before, and John completely messes up the words to his bit, the everybody had a hard year bit, but he's just making up new words on the spot, which, you know, very good. And then when they finish that, somebody, I don't know what they shout, but somebody shouts something from another roof at them, like just a member of the public just shouts something random at them, and John responds with something which, yeah, I think is quite amusing. And then they play Don't Let Me Down, where, yeah, this is an interesting one. This is the second performance. Yeah, it's different. The first performance is better, but we have kind of heard this version because the third verse has been edited in with the first performance on Let It Be Naked. Like this hybrid version is on Let It Be Naked, just so that where John messes up the lyrics on the third verse isn't included. But overall, the first performance of Don't Let Me Down is a better one, in my humblest of opinions. Anyway, after that, while they're performing Don't Let Me Down, the police finally get up on the roof, and Paul's like looking at them and stuff, and it's obvious that the show's gonna have to end. And then they play Get Back again. This is the final one. This is the version on Anthology 3. This is the version where Paul says they're gonna have you arrested. We've seen this version before. Mal Evans switches off John and George's amps, and then George switches his back on in protest, and I think Mal just switches John back on just for the sake of it, to keep the peace. And after they finish that, we get the classic speech from John, I hope we've passed the audition. And that's it. The Beatles go downstairs, and that is it. Their final ever public appearance. Yeah. And then when they're downstairs, they discuss the gig, and George asks why were the police there, what does disturbing the peace even mean? But the thing is, they're all smiles, and throughout this gig, they were all smiles. And John in particular seems to be really enjoying himself. And they're also downstairs listening back to the recordings. And they suggest playing the rest of the songs for the album downstairs that day, these slower ones that they couldn't do on the roof. But it turns out they can't because all the equipment's up on the roof and they need it brought down. So yeah, they don't do that. So instead they come back the next day, which is day 22 and the final day of the sessions. So this is when they record the slower acoustic songs in the basement. These are the things that are on the original Let It Be film, just before the rooftop concert, where they perform Two of Us, Long and Winding Road, and Let It Be. So the version of Two of Us that they record this day is the one that goes on the Let It Be album. Same thing with the song itself. The song Let It Be is the version that goes on the Let It Be album. And the version of the Long and Winding Road here is the version that goes on to Let It Be Naked. And the best version of it, why this version didn't go on the original Let It Be album, I don't know. But yeah, day 22. It's a weird one, this, because it's the credits are rolling over this footage, which I don't really like. I wish they'd shown like these full performances. I know they were in the original Let It Be film, but guess what? The original Let It Be film still isn't available. Apparently, it's going to be made available at a later date. But, you know, for the sake of it, I mean, after everything else we've had, you might as well have included those full performances of Let It Be, Two of Us, and Long and Winding Road that were in the original film. But anyway, that is it. Day 3. Yeah, day 3. I think it's a good day. It's very good. Probably on par with day 2. I'm not going to say it's better, but it was good to have the rooftop concert in full. And one of the things in particular I liked about the roof gig here is it had multiple shots at the same time. So rather than just being one camera all the time, it had like a camera on Paul, a camera on John, and a camera on street level, or a camera on the police, a camera on the full band, a camera on Billy Preston. You know, it was showing you multiple shots at the same time, which I think is really good. Yeah, it's good that way. So yeah, episode 3, top notch. So that is it. All 3 parts of Get Back is now released, and I thought I would briefly, since I've gone on for so long, talk about my overall thoughts on this. Is it good? Was it worth the wait? So overall, Get Back, the Beatles Get Back. This is easily the best thing that we've had since the Beatles, since the anthology. So it's the best thing in my lifetime anyway. And to be honest, it may be even better than the anthology. The only thing with the anthology is obviously it was the whole career spanning thing. But, you know, to see all this footage and effectively go from the start to the end, and to see that gig on the roof and how much enjoyment there obviously was and how good they sounded, and compare that to the darkest days at Twickenham, just like a fortnight before. It's incredible how they worked. And yeah, it's amazing that if Ringo hadn't had to go off and do the Magic Christian, they might have carried on and got more songs to do before they went up on the roof and did more songs on the roof, who knows. But yeah, I'm really impressed. Well done, Peter Jackson. This is so much better than the original Let It Be film. And I've always liked the original Let It Be film. Of all the Beatles films, I've always said Let It Be is the best one, even though it's not been available for God knows how long. But Get Back, yeah, this is the best thing. My only gripe is it's on Disney+. Please, Apple, if you're watching this, which you probably won't be. But if anyone from Apple is watching this, please, 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 please release it on DVD and Blu-ray and whatnot. And, or even just put it on other streaming services like Netflix or Amazon. You know, the bigger ones that most of us actually have. Which I think, to be honest, it will come to those things, to those sites as well. But a physical release would be good for this. And I think it will probably happen at some point. I have heard rumours that there'll be an additional 6 hours or something of footage on the DVD release. 6 or 12 hours, something like that. But yeah, whether that happens or not, I don't know. But what about, is this good for casual fans? Will this get new people into the Beatles? Well, this is effectively an 8-hour documentary, really. I know it's billed as 3 2-hour episodes, but it's probably closer to 8 hours. And I do think you have to be like me and probably you people watching this, a hardcore Beatles fan, really, to properly appreciate this. If you're a casual fan, you may find it hard going a bit, just watching them playing the same songs again and again and again. You know, so from a new starter perspective to the Beatles, as a casual fan, the anthology is still probably the best place to start. Not saying that they won't enjoy this, but particularly the Twickenham episode, they may struggle a bit with that because it's quite doom and gloom. It's not the most productive thing. But overall, this is, for us hardcore fans, it's heaven, really. And, you know, now it's like, I want more. There's all this other footage that still isn't released. But I do genuinely believe the best of that footage has now been released. I don't think Peter Jackson will have held anything of worth back. And the big question is, why has it taken 52 years for this footage to see the light of day? Or nearly 53 years now, actually. You know, I don't know why Michael Lindsay Hogg didn't release some of this footage at the time. I know at the time it was a cinema release, so it wasn't going to be like an 8-hour thing, but I suppose perhaps at the time the fact the Beatles had split up as well maybe contributed to the editorial decision of the original Let It Be film. But, you know, I suppose it's better late than never. We've finally got the full Let It Be, Get Back sessions released. A good chunk of it, I should say, not all of it, but yeah, and it has kind of changed my perspective on it. You know, it was always thought these were very dark sessions. It was doom and gloom, as George called it, the winter of discontent. And for the Twickenham sessions, yeah, I can kind of see that. But for the Apple sessions, which is what, day, I can't remember what day it was, 13 or something onward, no, day 12, sorry, onwards, 11, 12. Yeah, it's a completely different thing then. It's just joy. It's joyous. They're obviously having the time of their life, having great fun. But I think the Twickenham sessions maybe put a damper on it for them because that's all they could remember. But yeah, overall, Get Back, top notch, brilliant, 10 out of 10. Peter Jackson, take a bow. You've done a good job, worth the wait, and then some. So if you've made it all the way through this video, thank you very much. I know it's been a long one. I know I've rambled on. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.